Welcome to my review of the Anycubic Chiron 3D printer. I'll go over some of the pros and cons, the features of this printer, and show you some of my prints I've done on this. Stick around. The most notable thing about this printer is the build space. It's rather large compared to most printers. It has a huge size of 400 millimeter by 400 millimeter by 450 millimeter, and that's just the build space. That's not the actual full size of the printer. The full size of the printer is a bit bigger than that. The bed on this is an Ultra Base Pro, which means it generally does not need any adhesives to make prints stick. While the bed is hot, the prints stick very strong, and once the bed cools down to room temperature, the print comes right off. Coming from other printers with a glass or mirror bed they usually require tape, hairspray, or glue stick, this is a great alternative since there's no prep work and there's no cleanup. The bed heats up fast and evenly since it's a 24 volt. The only downside of this bed is the white lines will show up on your print, and I'll show that later in the video. This printer has auto bed leveling. When you get the printer for the first time, I suggest you do a manual bed level first, and then after that, you can start the process of doing the auto bed level. It uses a micro switch which hits multiple points on your bed, and once it's finished, it saves those settings into the printer. And then you generally won't need to re-level it again. The only time I had to re-level the bed was after changing the nozzle to a larger size. The printer's extruder is capable of taking PLA, ABS, PETG, and TPU. You can easily adjust the tension on it. It also has a filament out sensor, which will stop when the printer senses the plastic has run out. I've tested this myself about 12 to 13 times, and it worked every time, so I always like to use this, and I think it's a great addition to any printer. Some of the other printers I've had have used dials as the interface input commands for the screen, but on this printer it uses a touchscreen interface, which is very responsive. It's a very welcome change also. It's accurate to the input presses, it has a lot of features and options inside, and it's very easy to navigate, and it's definitely my favorite among my printers. Okay, so we can now take a look at some of the prints. I'm going to show you some small stuff, some big stuff, and just kind of what I'm working on at the moment. So this is a design I'm working on that I'm making for a computer case. It's made so each cube will light up individually from the LEDs underneath. This is a 0.24 layer height with a 0.4 nozzle. It was a pretty smooth finish all across it. It did very well on bridging. It's a little hard to see, but I didn't have any droops. It was a very solid bridge, and I had a nice even finish on top, so I was very happy with this print. So this is a family portrait I had done based on the anime Attack on Titan. I designed the picture frame, and I pulled the Titan up here from Thingiverse. I printed the picture frame with a 0.8 nozzle and 0.3 layer height, so you can do big prints like this fast. You can see here on the top that the lines are a little thicker than if it was a 0.4 nozzle, but I think that's a good trade-off for speed. On the Titan's hand here, you can see it's a 0.4 nozzle, so the layers on the lines are a lot finer and harder to notice, and it came out really good. And here you can see my painting skills. Not the best, but we all got to start somewhere. So this is probably one of the bigger things I've done on this printer so far, and this is a board game box called Terraforming Mars. I 3D printed a lot of things for this game, and it was unable to be all fit into the base cardboard box, so I designed and printed my own. I used a 0.8 nozzle at a 0.3 layer height, and by using a 0.8 nozzle you can really increase the speed that you print a lot of your parts if you're making something large like this. This is just some player pieces right here for money, and a container I printed out and designed, and it's real smooth, a little hard to see the detail due to the transparency of the plastic, but I didn't have any stringing, and it works very good, and with the transparent lid it's really cool to see through the top and see the parts. So here you can see some cities in the game. This is one of them where you can see the detail of the printer. And it did a really good job. I didn't have any stringing. I did this at 0.1 layer height with a 0.4 nozzle. And it took paint really well. Still need to get a little bit better on that, but it did a really good job with that. So this is a player board. What I did with this was I told the printer to stop after a certain height. So I printed black first, got it up a few millimeters, and I told it to pause, and I put white plastic in. And then I let it print a few more millimeters of height, and then I put the player color in to finish it off. You get a really nice finished look when you do prints like this with changing the color. And there's tutorials online you can look to see on how to do it, but I highly recommend it when you have the colors and you're able to pull it off. So here is the issue I was talking about with those white lines on the printer bed. So you can see these hex grid lines on top of this board game lid I made. And that's from those paint lines that are on the printer's bed. So you have to kind of plan on whatever's printing on that bed not to be on the surface of your print unless you're going to sand it and finish it. This is the infamous Benchy, a good stress test for your printer. It takes about 2 hours to print. This was 0.2 layer height. It did really good. I only had very light stringing in a few spots, but that's not a problem to clean up. This was a good showcase for a good dialed in Chiron printer if you have the correct settings, and I would not have a problem putting this on my display shelf. This was the longest bridge I was able to pull off. This is about 200 to 300 millimeter bridge. Just make sure you go real slow and you can pull this off. This is another board game design I made. This one is for holding little chits from your board games, and I really like how this came out with the color changing plastic. This is the biggest thing I've printed. This is about 2.5 feet by 2.5 feet. It's an access door I printed for my friend. I used a 0.8 nozzle to speed up the printing process. It's 3D penned together, kind of like a welding process, and it's very sturdy and pretty cool. So here we are with the pros and cons of the Chiron printer. First things first is the print area is large on this, more than normal printers, and you can really make some cool stuff with it. The second thing is Anycubic gives you a lot of free stuff when you open the box. You get a free roll of plastic, you get 2 hot ends, a whole bunch of nozzles, Allen wrenches, and of all the printers I've had, I've never got so much stuff with the printer, and this is definitely a bonus. Next is the filament out sensor. A lot of printers don't come with one of these, so this is pretty cool to have from the get-go. And this allows you to print all the way to the end of one of your plastic rolls and then continue on with a new one and then not have to throw away any wasted plastic because you're too worried about starting a print with only a little bit left on a roll. Another feature is the auto bed level. This was my first time with a printer with one, and I really like it. You get a nice even print, and I think it's a very cool feature to have, especially without having to mod it in yourself. And I really liked the screen on this. It's very responsive, and man, anything is better than using a dial on one of the older printers to try to input commands. So this touchscreen is just awesome. Okay, let's talk about some negatives now. So my biggest negative is actually the lines that are on the bed, because they will show up on your print if your print is going over any of those lines. If you're going to sand and finish your print, or it's the bottom of the print, which you're not going to see because it's on a table or something, then it's not a big deal. But if you're planning to use that finish to show, to be visible, then it becomes an issue. It took me a little bit of time to calibrate this printer, get in the right settings in Simplify 3D. After I get it all dialed in, it's been very solid. It just took a little longer than any of my other printers. Another negative is there's not as many mods available. The user base on this printer isn't as much as other more popular printers. When they released this printer back in 2018, they sent out pre-release copies to reviewers, but those copies actually were plagued with errors, so they actually had some bad press from that. But Anycubic actually stopped all production on that, fixed those issues, and then sent out fixed versions to the consumers. And this is one of those versions, and I've had none of the problems that all the old reviewers actually had of this. But I think that might have impacted how popular this printer would have been had it been all those problems fixed from the get-go. But because of that, there's not as much mods available on Thingiverse for this printer yet, but I'm sure there will be more as time goes on and the user base increases. And finally, it's loud. The fans on the power supply are loud because they're going full RPM. That's not to say it's any different with any other printers. The other printers are loud too. It's very comparable in that regard. You wouldn't want it in your bedroom, but in your computer room or something, it'll blend right in with your computer fans that are running. So other than that, nothing too bad. Final thoughts on the Anycubic Chiron. I really like this printer a lot. It's probably my favorite printer of all the printers I have right now. Due to the build space, I have a lot of ideas that I can work with now to print and do some really neat designs. I do not like the lines on the bed, but I can work around that and handle it. I highly recommend this printer if you're looking for a printer over 300mm bed size, and I really think this can meet a lot of people's demands for a large printer. If you have any questions or comments, go ahead and leave them below, and I will get back to them as soon as I can. Thank you guys for watching.